The Victorian era spanned from 1837 until 1901, when Queen Victoria reigned as monarch of the United Kingdom. This era was filled with many incredible developments, such as the Industrial Revolution and massive social reforms, but there were also a few odd things people did. Are you in disbelief? Let's just say that you are going to learn about top 10 bizarre customs of the Victorian era. Number 1. As taxidermy got increasingly popular, some people went overboard and took it way beyond what was necessary. Walter Potter was a Victorian taxidermist and is known as one of the most famous natural history artists of his time. His art is surreal in a sense, but he used dead animals to illustrate scenes from nursery rhymes, enough to make you wonder at his sanity. The most famous work of his is probably The Kitten's Wedding. Number 2. With horrible face masks, men and women kept their faces looking fresh for as long as they could. It turns out there is good news for those who think the beauty industry is overdone today. A rubber mask that resembled Hannibal Lecter's design was made with the name of the serial killer on it. A few dubious salves were applied to the inside, the face glove was strapped on, and one sweated profusely overnight. Number 3. Arsenic was often taken by Victorian women in order to maintain a pale complexion. The fashion trend in Victorian times was to look sun-kissed at all times, which is the exact opposite of the trend today. During the Victorian era, women would take small bites out of an arsenic-laced chalk wafers to maintain their youthful appearance. In spite of its high toxicity and addictive nature, it did at least give consumers a remarkably white complexion. Number 4. It was not uncommon for families to pose for photographs with their recently departed loved ones. Our discussion isn't about taking selfies next to an open casket, which some people undoubtedly do these days. It was common for Victorian families to dress their deceased in their Sunday clothes, prop them up, and then take their photographs with them. They mainly did this in order to preserve the memory of their loved ones by remembering them in the most beautiful light possible. Number 5. It was a common practice for grave robbers to steal people's bodies. As medicine was advancing rapidly at the time, one thing was essential to making these advances: fresh corpses. Grave robbers, also known as body snatchers, used to occupy the cemetery after families had left. They waited for them to leave the cemetery in order to work on the bodies before the corpses started to rot. The expensive price was paid by doctors to advance their anatomical knowledge for some of the freshest corpses available. Number 6. On the heads of women, entire birds would be worn. In fact, taxidermy was not just for Walter Potter and his fans, as women all over Europe and the United States wore hats with brilliantly horrific birds perched on their brows as a means of ornamentation. Victorian fashionistas were not content with tucking a feather into their hats. As it appears, they did not consider this sufficient. A conservationist estimated that, as a result of the increasing demand for these products, as many as 67 species of birds may be in danger of extinction due to the terrible trend taking place. Number 7. It was not uncommon for Victorian Englishmen to have parties for unwrapping mummies. In Victorian times, any member of society who wished to maintain some dignity and self-respect would not dare embark on a trip to Egypt without coming back with a mummy as a souvenir. It is no wonder that Victorian England was so fascinated with such things. After their return, they hosted parties where the mummified remains were unwrapped for friends and family to view. Number 8. People were kept as living garden gnomes by some wealthy Victorians. It is already a pretty weird sight to see gnomes in the garden, especially when you are confronted with extensive collections of them. In the 19th century, if you were wealthy, you probably kept old men like pets as a sort of companion, and you might even be a bit insane. It is well known that wealthy Victorians often prohibited these hermits from grooming themselves or caring for their bodies, and they often lived in the nooks and crannies of the gardens of the rich. It was almost always forbidden for them to speak. Number 9. Christmas postcards sent between Victorians were often unusual. While some Victorian Christmas cards are quite similar to the ones we see today, the rest are creepy and bizarre. Isn't it more interesting to send someone a card that features an anthropomorphic insect or frog than one with Santa Claus on it? The truth is, we might be passing a few of these along to friends and family this holiday season. Number 10. The eating of weird animals alive was a favorite hobby in countless clubs. A keen eater of exotic foods, even Charles Darwin, the man who came up with our theory of evolution, did not shy away from it. In some specialist clubs, marine creatures of the strangest species were served as food. As long as it was a novel experience, those in the Glutton Club, of which Darwin was a member, didn't seem to care what they ate. Now we can say that it is certain that some Victorians were extremely wealthy and had too much time at their disposal. You'd have a hard time even comprehending that some of these strange habits and hobbies were once acceptable in society. It will be great that radicals won't try to bring back some of these trends in the future.